set of scales is your best friend when it comes to dialing in a new coffee and troubleshooting bad espresso. If you haven't been controlling the dose that your grinder gives you and the yield the espresso machine gives you, then how do you know where to start troubleshooting? All it takes is a couple of extra grams of coffee or a couple of extra grams of water to completely change the ratio of coffee to water, making our espresso taste different. Coffee grinders, espresso machines, and your own technique is probably not as consistent as you would like to think. Luckily, the workflow for using a set of scales to measure our dose and measure our yield is really easy. Wait, measuring a liquid using a set of scales, don't you use mils for that? Well, you can, but that's a pretty inaccurate way to measure espresso, and that's because of the crema. Freshly roasted coffee beans are full of carbon dioxide. It's a byproduct of the roasting process. This CO2 leaches out of the coffee bean over time, and we call it degassing. Crema is produced when our brew water mixes with this CO2. So as your coffee ages, the crema takes up less space in the measuring cup, which means you're going to use more brew water to make up the difference in the volume. Weighing your liquid espresso can feel a little bit weird. All you have to do is slot the scale underneath your cup before you start brewing, make sure you tear it to 0, and then start brewing. You can weigh the entire espresso and you will know that you're getting the same result every single time. Coffee grinders are pretty inaccurate too. Mine is state of the art. It has a timer. Yes, you're right. Coffee grinders that use a timer are more accurate than the old clicky ones that we remember from the good old days. But they're still not that accurate. It is not uncommon to see a grinder that increases or decreases its dose by a couple of grams. Doesn't sound like a lot, but that could be up to 15% of your actual brew weight. We can all imagine why the clicky grinder is inaccurate. It uses a volume to measure something that changes size. When we are grinding fine or slightly coarse, different amounts of that coffee can fit into each wedge. It's very inaccurate. There's a couple of ways to weigh your ground coffee. The fastest way is to put your portafilter directly on the scales, tear it to 0, put it in the grinder, grind the dose, put it back on the set of scales, and there you have a result. You can then adjust your grind time up or down depending on what that dose is. It's probably a good idea to test a few in a row before you make any adjustments. There can be random outliers where you just get a stack of coffee falling into the basket. You can also use these little plastic containers that fit inside the portafilter. You can put the cup on the set of scales, tear it to 0, grind your coffee into the cup, put it back on the scales to measure it, and then dump it into the portafilter. Give it a good shake to distribute that coffee, and there you go. All right, you've made your point. I'll start using a set of scales. But what should my dose be and what should my yield be? Why, that is an excellent question, internet guy. Let's talk about dose first. Your dose is kind of determined by your basket size. Your coffee baskets are made to fit a certain amount of coffee in them. Some even have it written on the side. If yours doesn't, the way to test what your basket is designed for is to grind as much coffee as you can in, tamp it, and then put it in the espresso machine. If you take it out and you see that there is an impression from where the coffee touched the shower screen, then that's too much coffee. You need to reduce your dose. Here at Freelance, our baskets are designed to hold 20 grams of coffee, so that's how much I put in them. Yeah, but what yield should I use? Have you subscribed yet? Yeah, press the button and... Oh. Yield is a little bit harder. It depends on how dark your roast is and kind of what you and your customers like. A very basic rule of thumb that I always start off with is a rule of 2 to 1. That means every gram of coffee that goes into the basket should make 2 grams of espresso. Because I use 20 grams, then I aim for my espresso to weigh 40 grams. This is a very basic industry standard ratio. You can absolutely change it, and you do that by adjusting how much water flows through your espresso machine. For lighter roasts, I like to have a higher yield, up to maybe 100 grams, and for darker roasts, I tend to prefer to have a smaller yield, maybe a 35 grams out of 20. By using a set of scales, and a timer, which we'll talk about in another video, we have the data to be able to communicate our espresso recipe effectively. Our espresso recipe looks like this: dose, yield, brew time. If you collect these numbers, you should be able to communicate exactly how you brewed your coffee. When I started using a set of scales in my career in the coffee industry, it totally changed everything. I now had a way to communicate to the people around me how I thought this coffee tasted best, and I had a way to log my coffees so that I could go back and see how I thought this coffee was best enjoyed. It's incredibly powerful, and I hope you find it useful. Look, you're smart. You get how this works. YouTube has an algorithm and it shows more people videos based on the engagement. If you thought this video was worth it, and if you think that other people would benefit from knowing about a set of scales and how to implement it in brewing espresso, I would appreciate it if you did 3 things for me. First of all, give the video a thumbs up. It means a lot. Chuck me a subscribe, because I would love to share all of the other things that I've learned over the past 10 years. Finally, if you could give me a comment telling me what you would like to see next, that would be a huge input. Thanks very much. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. It's like the 3rd day that I've tried to shoot this video. I've worn the same shirt a bunch of different times just to keep the continuity. See the magic. That's the magic that you guys don't see. 3 days of shooting. Anyway, quickly check the script that I wrote. Okay. Now that we have a